the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Irfan Nasrullah.
Nasrullah here.
Brian Herr.
Here.
Mary Jo Lafreniere. Amy Ritterbush.
Here.
Mary Jo.
She seems to be
I know
muted.
she's there. We just can't hear her, I guess, or she can't hear us. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Kamalu.
Here.
Ms. Lazarus.
Here.
Anticipated speakers this evening may include Roy McDowell and John Westerling. If there's anyone attending who would like to speak during a public forum of the agenda, you must notify the meeting host in advance. You may do this now by raising your hand, by using the raise hand feature of Zoom. This open meeting of the Hopkins Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we're complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. For this meeting, the Select Board is convening by video conference via Zoom webinar, as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one of its many channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We're now turning to the first agenda item. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment. For the public forum of the agenda, the chair will work with the meeting host to call each pre-registered speaker to make their comment. Each speaker must begin by identifying their name and address. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes for their comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
To the flag of the United States of America,
the
to the
Republic
republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To the flag.
Thank you.
United
Mr. Westerling, you're not on
States
mute.
of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. So is there any member of the public who wishes to speak? If so, please identify yourself by name and address first. Josh, is there anyone that had previously identified themselves?
No, not previously, and I see no hands raised right now.
Great. So we are moving past that. Street acceptance. Legacy Farms North. At the last meeting of the board, held a public hearing on proposed acceptance of the Legacy Farms North as a public way. The board wanted to hear the result of site walks with town officials and hear an update on the punch list items before formally voting on the recommendation. John Westerling and Roy McDowell to provide updates. Mr. Kamalo, do you want to bring us up to date on this before I open it up to John and Roy?
I think you stated in your introduction, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, you can move on to John for an update and Mr. McDowell.
All right, Mr. Westerling, you're on.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Through the chair, I'm happy to report that the entire punch list is complete. We are satisfied that they have met all the requirements for the construction of the roadway. Just the construction, Mr. Chairman.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I can't hear anything. I don't know why.
What'd you say?
Muted.
What'd you say?
Some reason I'm not getting any sound.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right.
I've turned it off and gone on again, and
Maybe try on your phone. You want to try on your phone? Okay. Mr. McDowell, is there anything that you can add to what Mr. Westerling said?
I will just confirm, we spent a lot of time last week doing the entire list. We had Bob from Beta out twice to make sure everything was done to his satisfaction. We did meet today with John Geklich, with John, with Bob from Beta, and it was confirmed, as John just mentioned. The only concern I have is I was hit with something today, which I'm told the town, I don't know where this issue about pesticides keeps coming up, because any issues that were with pesticides were resolved long ago and were remediated and closed out with Ransom Environmental. And late today, I got from Elaine a copy of something where the town wanted us to indemnify the town relative to any potential issues relative to pesticides. And frankly, it blindsided us. I went over with my attorney, and he sees no reason why we should be doing that. And I see no evidence as to why it's even an issue.
So, Mr. Kamala, does this item that Mr. McDowell is speaking of, does that fall into the four corners of the punch list for the street acceptance? Is this something that we should hash out and figure out now before the town meeting, so we're not left on the hook if need be? Or is this something that you guys can handle offline?
My understanding is that it's an issue that has been in discussion, either through the Board of Health or through the planning board process. I do hear Mr. McDowell's position that he is somewhat surprised that it's coming up in the context of the punch list. However, my understanding is that it's an issue that has been out there. We have also been in discussion with town council regarding how it might relate to tonight's conversation. I think the recommendation from town council was that should the board be inclined to recommend approval or street acceptance at town meeting, that it could be conditioned on some indemnity being in place. And Elaine, in fact, has been dealing with Ray on this one directly, and she, with your permission, she can provide more details.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Elaine.
so it's felt that with a fairly simple indemnification of the town against any claims that are filed due to
I'm hearing
pesticide-
you, but that's not helping me.
due to pesticides in the roadway, an agreement that the developer would indemnify the town could address this issue, which has been out there for some time.
Mr. Chairman,
So, yes, sir, Mr. McDowell.
I will say there has never been a discussion with the select board or the planning board about pesticides in the road itself. Many years ago, or a couple of years ago, there was a discussion.
I know, but it's not working.
There was a discussion of pesticides in one of the parcels that was acquired by Pulte, that Ransom went in, did a full investigation, did a removal, closed that out, and there's been no other indications of pesticides, to my knowledge, anywhere. As a matter of fact, one of the neighbors on Wilson Street requested that we do a complete investigation of all the soil piles in the trails development, which we did, and that came back with no results relative to reportable levels of pesticides. But never has there been a discussion of pesticides in the roadway area at all, nor has
Yeah,
there
I
been
have.
nor has there been any evidence that there is, and that's why we're frankly shocked to even hear about this today.
Okay. So board members, why don't we start? Mr. Nasrullah, any questions or any discussion?
Yeah, well, my thought on this is Mr. McDowell is saying there's no issues with pesticides, and I don't see why we wouldn't want him to indemnify us if something does. I mean, there's no issue on his end, then why not indemnify us? I think if there is an issue with pesticides that needs to be cleaned up, I don't think the town should be on the hook.
So, my thought is, so he stated that this has never come up before through the Board of Selectmen nor through the Planning Board, or the Select Board. So if this is strictly based on the roadway and the acceptance of the roadway, just the physical roadway, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Nestrel, and I agree with you. If there's nothing to hide, why hide? And I'm not implying, Mr. McDowell, I'm not implying that you're hiding anything, but, you know, if all of a sudden this becomes a pesticide issue on the side of the road that the town doesn't okay, who's left holding the bag on this, whether it's through an early road acceptance as we're presented now, or if it isn't? And I don't know if Elaine or if Norman could answer that.
So kind of going back to my DEP days, you know, I think would be looking, if there is a pesticide, if there is a pesticide issue, they'd be looking at who generated the pesticides, and that would go back to prior to Roy's ownership. And you know, would be looking, trying to find someone who can pay. I don't think the town should have to pay. If there is no issue, then so be it. But I think an indemnification is a way to mitigate any risk to the town.
So, Mr. Westerling, the acceptance of this road, the actual physical part of this motion of this agenda item, how much is it strictly the road and the sidewalk? Is there a 10-foot easement? Is there a 50-foot easement on each side? What is the onus of the town once we accept this road?
Mr. Chairman, the width of the roadway, I believe it's either a 50 or a 60-foot right of way. So that's the portion that we're accepting. And my understanding is that there is one report out there that the town has from the environmental group, and there are at least 6 others out there that we have not seen. We don't know where those samples were taken, and we don't know what those showed. And the big concern for the town is that should we have an excavation in the future, if we have to replace a water main and there are soils that come out of that trench, we have to test the soils. If they have pesticides in them, then we have to pay for their disposal at an off-site area, which there are none of those in New England. So it could be a large cost to the town.
I didn't even think about, like, because I was thinking if there's pesticides under the road, I don't, maybe it's stopping the ants from crawling through the hot top. I don't know, but I know that Mr. McDowell isn't in the pesticide making or applicating business. So those pesticides that are found there probably, like Mr. Nasrullah said, were not put there by he or his company or even his subs.
Mr. Chairman, can I give you a little background?
Sure.
So the testing goes all the way back to Haley and Aldridge, and all test results at one time or another were given to various town boards. I think if the town looked back last 10 years or more, they'd find all these things. And if they can't, I can readily get them all the reports going back to the beginning, because we have all of them. The pesticide that one's talking about here, it's called Deldrin. And Deldrin was typically used for fruit trees and things such as that with Western nurseries many years ago. The site was tested thoroughly before we bought it, and there were 2 locations that were located with Deldrin. Now, Deldrin, by its nature, sits in the top 6 to 12 inches of soil. It's in the actual loam portion of the soil, and those are the areas that it was tested. It's not down 3, 4, or 5 feet. And to give you an example, when the road was built, the road grades have been changed anywhere from 3 to 4 feet in elevation, as much as 10 or 12 feet in elevation. So any possible soil that's in that 50-foot buffer was long taken out and replaced with gravel and various other materials to create this road structure. So even though there were no indications of Deldrin in those areas, even if they were, that would have long since been gone because of the massive excavation that took place.
Yep. So,
And my attorney says it's not common practice, nor is it reasonable to ask us. And by the way, when you read Ray's indemnification, it's kind of a non-starter because it goes way beyond us. It talks about other landowners, which would include Pulte Trails, various homeowners associations. It's quite extensive, and it would have a sort of a dampening effect, if you will, on the value of all those homes, where you've got this overlying agreement that frankly has no evidence as to why it should even exist in the first place.
okay. So I don't think that the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board is gonna solve any of this tonight. I don't think any of us, well, maybe Mr. Nasrullah is equipped to figure out what we need to do. I think that this is probably between you, Mr. McDowell, your attorney, and our attorney. I'm trying to see what we can do to make sure that we're squared away for Saturday's meeting, and how we can kind of posture our town in its best light to get this thing taken care of.
Mr. Chairman, if I can make a recommendation that you consider as a board voting to approve, subject to before Saturday, having a reasonable agreement that's between Ray Mieris and Brian Connolly, our counsel.
Mr. Kamalo, your thoughts on that, please?
I'm trying to relate what Roy just said to the recommendation from town council. Roy, do you mind coming again? You're saying this board's vote, if I understood you correctly, will be subject to some agreement being reached between the two councils?
So what I'm suggesting is the board vote approval subject to an agreement between our council and town's council as to how we go forward.
How we go forward regarding the pesticides?
Well, I don't know if that's, our indication is that we're not going to sign anything that indemnifies, but there may be some middle ground that we can discuss with Ray. It's obviously not going to get solved here on the phone tonight with this board and myself. I think it buys us the next few days before Saturday with Ray and our council and Elaine possibly and you, Norman, to come to some reasonable understanding of what we're dealing with. In the worst cases, you don't agree or we don't agree, and then you decide how you want to go forward. But I think it would be nice, subject to that agreement, having the board endorse it this evening.
So in other words, if just to complete your thought, if the two councils don't agree, does the board vote then become null and void?
That's purely up to you.
Okay.
I would think,
I have a suggestion too.
oh, go ahead, Amy.
I didn't know if we could schedule a meeting just in case for like 9 a.m. on Saturday, in case we need to revisit this, then, if it's in case an agreement is not reached by then.
We're scheduled, Amy.
We are scheduled, okay.
Yeah.
So if we took a vote tonight, could we vote to a different vote then on Saturday morning? If we voted to recommend today?
Yes, the board could reconsider.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so I'm trying to search the memory bank on this one. And it's my understanding what Mr. McDowell said is that this just came up today about this concern about pesticides. If that's the case, I can't remember in the last 17 years I've been looking at this situation that we ever talked about pesticides before. I mean, the town considered seriously purchasing that land. A lot of folks were opposed to purchasing that land. You would have thought pesticides came up then in that debate in town, but I don't recall that being an issue at all. When I was on the planning board and certainly on this board, I don't ever recall ever talking about pesticides except at Lake Maspinock. So something's just amiss here for me. I understand it's a concern for the town and I share it, but why it's happening at the 11th hour after this many years just seems very odd.
Yeah.
So,
I tend to agree, and with Mr. McDowell saying, like, one of the things he said, if it's true that Deldrin does manifest itself in the loam, then when anybody puts a road in, even with sidewalks where there's loam in between the road and sidewalk, they have to excavate out all the loam, all the sub, compact it, bring in the, it depends on how high of a fill they're going, and maybe they bring in a 6-inch minus gravel and compact it every X amount of inches, and then a 3-inch minus and a 1-inch minus, and then they hot top it, and then they come back and they put six or so inches of loam over the imported gravel. So I'm thinking about the entire 50 or 60 foot wide swath that Mr. Westerling stated. If we're talking about the town just owning that, and the fact that if what I've not researched it about that Deldrin, but if that does manifest itself solely in the loam and sub, that stuff is long gone. That loam is long gone, and it is not on that site. It might be on the site, but it's at different locations. It's not under the area of responsibility on this town owned road. So I am trying to figure out how we can move forward and get this thing approved the right way without leaving the town out to dry, and trying to kind of infuse a little common sense on this. But sometimes it's not that easy.
I agree with everything that everyone is saying, including what Mr. McDowell is saying. I'm no expert on the specific pesticide, but I think it makes sense to have the vote subject to an agreement between Ray and Mr. McDowell's attorney.
Yeah,
I do. If that,
go ahead,
Right.
Amy.
I do agree with Irfan if that the vote would be subject to, because I really want to get the road approved. So I know we need the bus access,
Yeah.
but I do want the town to be protected. And I do remember a resident coming to the planning board with concerns about the pesticides, and I can't recall now whether it was in relation to the road or the retention basin at the corner of Wilson and Legacy Farms North. But I do remember that coming up before. So I'd be comfortable recommending the road tonight on the condition that the attorneys come to an agreement.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Legacy North or Legacy South. It's been a long process. I have heard the word pesticides before, but I don't think it was in the context of Legacy North.
I can give you, Mr. Chairman, I can give you a little background. That true. Amy remembers that very well. It was a resident on Wilson Street that questioned whether there was any pesticides in some large loam piles where the trails are. And the planning board recommended testing those piles, which were tested, and they came back below reportable levels.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may,
Yes.
I believe Sean McAuliffe, who's very familiar with this topic, is present.
Okay. I'm looking at the panelists. I don't see Sean McAuliffe there.
He's on now.
Oh, there he is. He's on, but he's on mute. Mr. McAuliffe,
Good evening.
good evening. Have you been listening to us, and are you up to speed as to what we're
Yes.
talking about? Okay.
Yes.
Is there any light that you can shed on this?
So the point one, the report wasn't released to the town until November 17th, 2017. So that's when I received the email from Roy. So that may be why it's not wholly familiar with those that have been involved with the project from day one. Two, it's not the Dealdrin alone. It's the fact that an asphalt batch plant, a landfill cannot take any pesticide contaminated soil. So the soil can't be discarded just anywhere because of the similar soils provision that exists. So the issue is that if there are any pesticides at detectable concentrations that are dug up, they have to be handled differently than if the soils were from another location in town.
So you're saying so is there a quantifiable level that would make it so, at 0.000002 micrograms, it's okay to have Deldrin in it, but 0.00003 is not, or?
For disposal, actually, I could get a clarification first thing in the morning on that. But so it's not the dieldrin, it's not any of the other pesticides that are documented in that report. It's the fact that they're there.
Okay.
And my only concern is that our, like, I'm entrusted in protecting the residents' exposure to potential environmental issues. And that's the only reason that this has been brought up.
Okay.
And then as far as, none of the prior owners, because of circular liability, none of the prior owners are on the hook for this. It's the current owner. They purchased the land with the potential issue, so they would be on the hook. Just like if we took
Yep, I
the
understand.
land, we'd be on the hook.
Okay. So
Mr. Chairman, could I respond a little bit to that?
real quick, Roy, yep.
Okay, so I understand what Sean is saying, and as we discussed before Sean came on, by the way, the right of way is 50 feet, not 60 feet.
Thank you.
Everything in that 50 feet within multiple feet of elevation has been changed from the beginning. So there was nothing in that 50 feet that was there before. We cut a swath through, there's at least 60 feet wide, and then reconstructed everything. Some places 3 feet, some places as much as 10 feet in elevation changes. So that's changed. As far as any soil conditions, it really comes down to what DEP is quote unquote reportable levels, because almost any and all soil has something in it. But the key thing is, as long as it's below reportable levels, it is then construed as not being a danger.
Hello?
Okay.
So
So I guess what I'm going to say is we could come up with all these scenarios and where it came from and what it is, but there's nobody on this board that are experts on that. So I would, as Amy said, I would like to go ahead and approve this pending successful deliberations with our town council, Mr. McDowell and his town council, for Saturday. I don't think that, I think we've beaten this horse 10 ways till Sunday. So board, do you have any issues with that thought process?
No,
None.
Irfan, you said you're okay with that?
I'm fine with that, yeah.
Brian,
Fine.
Mary Jo,
fine.
Amy?
Yep. agree.
All right, so I'm going to request a motion to recommend acceptance of Legacy Farms North as a public way at the 2020 annual town meeting, conditioned upon the execution, if determined to be in the town's interests, by the select board in its sole discretion by owners of all parcels of land abutting the portion of Legacy Farms North Road that is to be accepted as a public way pursuant to this vote, of an agreement in form acceptable to town council, indemnifying and holding the town harmless against any claims arising from pesticide contamination of land within that public way. Mr. Kamalu, based on everything that we were just talking about, is that motion in order?
I think based on what you have heard from Sean, it is in order. I'm not so sure if Roy would agree.
Yep. So I was going to circle back. Mr. McDowell, your thoughts on that motion?
Well, I'm concerned that the motion is a de facto motion that's basically verbatim what Ray said. What I'm suggesting is not that motion. I would like you to suggest simply that we come to an agreement with both councils, Norman and Elaine, to the satisfaction of them to the board, because it may take on a whole different methodology. And I think the way you've worded it, it's just plugged into one thing only.
Okay, so do we, Mr. Kamalu, do we move this until Saturday morning?
I believe so. I think the indication, I think the indication we're getting from the board is that the board is inclined to approve and recommend the street acceptance.
Right.
Subject to council's agreeing and the
Right.
board receiving that update
Right.
Saturday morning.
So we can just, why don't we just move it to our Saturday morning at 09 meeting?
Yeah.
Board members, you okay, Mr. Nasrullah?
Okay, that sounds
Mr.
good. to me.
Herr?
Yeah, I just want to take a second and thank John Westerling. I saw him there earlier today doing that inspection that he had promised last week. And I know we had a pretty good conversation about last week. So thank you, John, for your efforts today.
Through the chair, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Westerling.
You're welcome.
Ms. Lafreniere, are you good with that? Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Good. So you're okay with that? We'll push it off till.
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Yeah,
Ms.
I saw
Ritterbusch?
John earlier today too, and he explained everything to me, and I was okay with it then, so.
Good. Ms. Ritterbusch?
Yep, I'm okay with that, and I'm very happy that the punch list is completed too. I
Good,
should have said
yes.
that earlier.
Absolutely.
Excellent work, and thanks to Mr. Westerling, thanks to Mr. McDowell.
Thanks, John.
Both of you guys did a great job getting everything taken care of, and I'm confident that we can get this thing taken care of by Saturday.
Thank you.
Whoops. So we will go the FY 2021 budget updates and the 2020 annual town meeting. We will discuss updates on the 2021 budget and the draft motions and the town meeting presentations. Mr. Kamalo, could you give us an update on the budget and on the town meeting motions?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that this evening I have only the briefest of updates on the budget and the annual town meeting. Again, the town meeting occurring this coming Saturday. In terms of the motions document and the warrant, which also ties to the budget, in preparing to execute the articles that have been drafted for town meeting consideration, the finance team discovered an issue with the language of proposed Article 3. This is in relation to the bond premiums. The warrant article is one that is used in recent years or has been used in recent years to apply excess premiums from projects to slightly lower costs for those projects or for similar projects. Since we do not have any new capital articles in this year's proposed budget, the article would not be executable as is normally the case. Therefore, after consultation with the finance and accounting staff, I recommend that the select board vote to reconsider its previous vote and vote to recommend no action on Article 3. This matter can be addressed at the May 2021 town meeting with no additional costs and no adverse impact on any pending projects. And thank you for your consideration of this request.
Okay. Board, any comments on Mr. Kamalo's update?
Nope.
Mr. Nasrullah?
Nope, makes sense to me.
Mr. Herr?
He's in charge. I'm fine.
Okay. Ms. Lafreniere
Okay.
and Ms. Ritterbusch?
I'm okay as long as it doesn't affect any pending projects. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I move that we reconsider our previous vote and moved vote for no action on Article 3 of the town warrant.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, with your permission,
Sir, go ahead.
the
Yep.
record will show that those were two separate motions.
Okay. The record is showing that as I'm watching Elaine type.
I accept that as my two separate motions.
Okay. And is it seconded through the, approve?
Yes, seconded.
Accepted through the second. Okay. No further discussion. So Mr. Nasrullah, how do you vote?
Nasrullah, yes.
Mr. Herr,
Or yes.
Ms. Lafreniere,
Lafreniere, yes.
Ms. Ritterbusch,
Yes on both.
Ted Stone, yes on both. Okay, good. Mr. Kamalo, is that it?
That's it.
All right. Let's see. Whoops, excuse me 1 second here. So liaison reports and board invitees. I can't imagine anyone has anything from last week.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Kamalo.
town manager's report.
Oh yeah, can't forget that, can we?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Kamalo.
Yeah. Um, in terms of the Main Street Corridor project, I think as we reported last last week, the apparent low bidder was $500,000 lower than the engineer's estimate. VHB, Mass DOT are now reviewing the bids, and it is anticipated that a contract could be awarded within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful news.
Great
Yeah.
news.
And then hiring freeze exception request.
Uh-huh.
I'm respectfully requesting that the board consider allowing the hiring of a highway assistant foreman. This is the working foreman on the highway division, and an IT specialist. Both vacancies are due to resignations.
Okay. I don't know who it's not Josh, right?
No, it's not Josh. It's
We would not
Esther. And in
accept
fact-
Josh's resignation.
We're
Um,
backfilling two positions then, right?
Yeah, they're not creating new ones. And I happen to know the assistant foreman. I've known him since he came into town on the DPW, and he has got some giant boots to fill. I'll tell you that right now. He is absolutely a wonderful employee and a wonderful worker. So the town will certainly miss having him around. But as in the true spirit of teamwork, we will pick up his slack. So, Mr. Nasrullah, I saw you take a big inhale to hopefully make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to exempt from the hiring freeze, the hiring of a highway assistant foreman and an IT specialist.
Second.
Okay.
Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none. Mr. Nasrullah, how do you vote?
Nasrullah, yes.
Mr. Herr,
Yes.
Ms. Lafreniere,
Lafreniere, yes.
Ms. Ritterbusch?
Ms. Ritterbusch, yes. I'm just
That's
going to add that IT specialists are very important in the age of COVID when we're all closed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these positions aren't going to change. They're already in the budget, just so everybody understands.
So does anyone have, by exception, does anyone have liaison reports? No,
I have none.
everyone's just getting ready for town meeting. Couple of things I'd like to mention. I was invited to a wreath ceremony at the Common on Saturday through the 26.2 Foundation and the BAA. I participated in that with the Alpha Omega group. There were quite a few people there. Michael Neese from the 26.2, I was there. It was a pretty good ceremony, and there was a lot of off camera, a lot of talk that was actually very, very impressive with the history of the marathon. And I don't have a giant history or following of the marathon, with the exception of since I was a kid trying to steal sweatshirts when they were throwing them off as they start running. But when they stopped fitting me, I stopped running for them. So, but it was really was a wonderful, I was lucky to participate in that, and I'd like to thank Mr. Kilduff, the 26.2 and the BAA, for reaching out to us. And then on a sad note, the town has, there was a tragedy that happened with a young child last week, and it was a child who passed away, and the silver cloud. I mean, the silver lining in the cloud is to, when something tragic like that, is to watch this absolutely incredible, resilient town come together and really pull for one of its own, and the family that person left. And with everything that's been going on throughout the town, the state, and the country politically, it's very sad that it takes a small tragedy in a small town like that to really make us take a step back and reprioritize and come together as a town. And it did show resiliency. It did show how heartfelt that our town is. And for a lot of people that were on the fence, starting to lose their love for the town, I can tell you that there's been a lot of people that have turned that around, and our faith in our town is is as high as ever. And kudos to the police department, the fire department, and our condolence goes out to that child's family and to that child himself. So I'm not going to mention a name here because the child is under the age of 18, but anybody with any involvement at all in social media or town government or anything with the town certainly is aware of what's going on. And I tip my hat to the residents of the town, where all of a sudden when something like this happens, the blue hats and the red hats go away, and we're simply one community again. And that's what this town's all about, and that's what it's always been. And so our condolences to the young boy's family, and tip of the hat to the town in coming together and doing the right thing for the right reason. So that said, board, is there anything else that you guys would like to talk about? Mr. Nasrullah?
Nope, all set.
Mr. Herr?
No, thanks.
Miss Lafreniere?
Yeah, what time do you want us there Saturday morning before the town meeting?
Well, if we're going to be there, we can be there 8:45.
Okay.
If it's remote, why don't you sign in at about 7:30 so we can get your technological.
There, I know what happens. I'm on two different
All right.
things, and that's the problem.
Just busting your chops. So yeah, 8:45 at the.
Of course you are.
Miss Ritterbush.
Oh, I just wanted to piggyback on what you said about the town coming together. I really appreciated the Talk About Change event last week, and we kept in mind the child that had been lost at that time. And I was after the event was over, I walked around town, and I was so happy to see chalk at the library, the town hall, fire and police, and the schools, and it was really lovely. So.
Yep, and I know that Rachel down at Marty's really went above and beyond doing what she had to do to go out and put blue balloons all over the place, and it was just a wonderful. Everything has just been, in light of such a tragedy, it's refreshing to see the town come together again. So. Okay, and on not quite a serious note, but for the town meeting, are we all going to be under a tent, or do I need? I'm super pale and I burn really easily. Do I need to bring a bunch of sunscreen, or we're all under a tent, right? I don't know. Mr. Kamalu.
It is intended that the select board will be under a tent unless any one member decides that they will refuse to wear a mask.
Okay.
So, all right. So let's understand, Mr. Kamalu, that with many watchful eyes watching us, we cannot use our position of authority for any advantage. So don't put us under the tent while other people aren't, just because we're select board member people.
Okay, I'll bring my sunscreen just in case then.
Bring your sunscreen and your
Or a
safari
hat.
hat. Yeah.
Wear a hat.
Yeah.
It looks like it's going to be a decent day. So.
Good.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
You may.
Further to your statement, I also want to acknowledge the effort by the Youth and Family Services Department in helping the community go through this very difficult tragedy and very difficult time. I have the front row seat to see at very close range the work that they are doing to benefit the school department, town departments, police and fire. And it's amazing to see the great and fabulous work that both Dawn and Colleen continue to provide to this community.
Yeah, and I apologize for leaving those guys out of my initial statement. That's what happens when you wing it. So, yeah, Dawn and Colleen, awesome, excellent job. And I guess the unfortunate part of the fact that those guys knocked it out of the park. The unfortunate part is because they've had to do it before, and they're familiar with these things, and it's very sad that they've become so proficient, but they are proficient and they've done a wonderful job. And they are right there on the front lines with the fire, fire, police, everybody else involved. So yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Kamala, for leaving those out. That's my fault, 100%. So thank you, Don, and thank you, Colleen. Much appreciated. That said, Mr. Nasrullah,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
any further discussion? Hearing none. I'm going to call everyone by their first name right now. Irfan,
Nasrullah, yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Brian, yes.
Mary Jo,
Mary Jo, yes.
Amy,
Me, yes.
and I am Brendan, and I say yes, and thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Norman and Elaine.
See you tomorrow. See you
Thank you, Mary Jo.
Early Saturday. Yep.